The views and opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Open Sky Radio. Please be advised.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to The Fire You Can't Put Out with you again this week. Hello, it is I, Melvin. I want to thank you for joining us for episode 34. Special shout out to my producer and good buddy, Kevin. Special shout out to the good folks at Open Sky Radio. Thank you for putting us on, and to you, the listener. We are going to get into the potpourri of news that was this week. Today we are taping on Thursday, September 12th. Yesterday was the 12th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. I was going to tape yesterday, which would have had us putting the show out more than likely yesterday, but I feel like with all of the 9/11 stuff that was going on, it would have just been lost in a sea of that stuff. So I decided to go ahead and hold off until today, and then hopefully it stands out a little bit more today. 12 years since the 9/11 attacks. I'll tell you what surprised me about the attacks and what did not surprise me, or not the attacks, but the anniversary. What surprised me about the anniversary? No, let's do this. Let's start with what did not surprise me. Flags everywhere. Freedom. America, America, America. Fine and dandy. What did surprise me was how often we are told, shrink the government. Get rid of government, right? If you'll remember, the unified voices after 9/11 were in favor of the police and firefighters, many of whom lost their lives on that dreadful Tuesday, right? But what we've heard since then is the slowly raised levels about shrink the government, get rid of government. And I'm not sure if a lot of folks realize this, but police, firefighters, these first responders, they're government workers. Oh yeah, no. You are nowhere near as shocked as I am, right? They're union thugs. They all have unions. They have health care. They've got good pay. And on this day, we look back and we say, hey, it's 9/11. Shout out to the first responders. All of the firehouses in America held a special remembrance. The police stations held a remembrance. Everybody put their flags out. We call it Patriot Day, which I'm cool with. I think it sounds good. But after the 9/11 attacks, there were so many flags just everywhere. Flag bumper stickers and just flags everywhere. So I'm cool with that part. What bothers me is the whole Patriot Act thing. I wondered if it was a part of that. All right, and here's what surprised me. Listening to conservative talk radio, and a day like 9/11 is just golden for listening to conservative talk radio. Most of us on this side of reality are remembering the attacks of Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. The conservatives, Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. It has been, of course, the Benghazi attacks happened on 9/11. It's been a year since the Benghazi attacks. Now, wait. I don't want to diminish the importance of any attack that's done upon America, okay? But the Benghazi attacks, we got very little, if any, warning about. And I think 3 people died. Now, that's 3 too many. But there were 3,000 in the Twin Towers. There's a lot of impeachment talk right now coming from the conservatives. And they say, hey, Benghazi. Well, now wait a minute. There was none of that talk with Bush. Now I understand it's politics, but let us not forget. back in 2001, the White House had gotten plenty of warnings. They didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but they got a ton of warnings. During the G8 summit in Italy of that year, Condoleezza Rice later testified after the attacks that when Bush was in Italy, they had him, for the G8 summit, they had Bush sleeping on an aircraft carrier. Why? Because they'd gotten warnings that terrorists were planning on flying planes into the building where the president was staying. And so he stayed on an aircraft carrier. But you and I didn't hear anything about that, right? Then, of course, there's the PDB, the Presidential Daily Briefing, from August 6th, 2001, where Bush was on his ranch, just taking a mad long vacation that year, right? And the Presidential Daily Briefing came out, and it was titled, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in America. And his chief of staff flew it out to him in Texas, handed it to him, and said, I think there's an attack coming. Look at what this says. Bush looks at it, reads it, pats him on the back, and says, you've covered your ass, forgive my language, you can go home now. And it was nothing. All of that lost to history. What happened in Benghazi was terrible, obviously. What happened on 9/11, in my opinion, 100 times worse. They're all bad. But this is politics. So the one that happened on a Democratic president's watch is the worst thing ever. Right? The one that happened on the Republicans' watch, well, I've heard more than one conservative say that that was Bill Clinton's fault. Either way, 12 years since, and it seems that we've learned very little. 9/11 led us into 2 unnecessary wars. And those wars, we were told, had something to do with Iraq and weapons of mass destruction, poison gases that were going to be released upon America. So you can forgive us for being skittish and having deja vu when the president comes to us and says, hey, poison gas, weapons of mass destruction, we've got to strike Syria. This has been an interesting week with that respect. A week ago, we were looking at going to war in a mad way. The president seemed like he couldn't be deterred. Then we get this. Iran is plotting revenge on the U.S. Follow me now. The U.S. has intercepted an order from Iran to militants in Iraq to attack the U.S. Embassy and other interests in Baghdad in the event of a strike on Syria, officials said amid an expanding array of reprisal threats across the region. Military officials have been trying to predict the range of possible responses from Syria, Iran, and their allies. U.S. officials said they are on alert for Iran's fleet of small, fast boats in the Persian Gulf where American warships are positioned. U.S. officials also fear Hezbollah could attack the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. And those deployments include a strike group of USS Nimitz aircraft carrier and 3 destroyers that are in the Red Sea and an amphibious ship, the USS San Antonio, in the eastern Mediterranean, which would help with any evacuations. U.S. military is also ready Marines and other assets to aid evacuation of diplomatic compounds if needed, and the State Department began making preparations last week for potential retaliation against U.S. embassies and other interests in the Middle East and North Africa. A delay in a U.S. strike would increase opportunities for coordinated retaliation by groups allied with the Assad government, including Shiite militias in Iraq, according to U.S. officials. Now, that's the case that they're making. So this is Iran saying there will be attacks. When George Bush attacked Iraq, and by the way, that was the other thing. We were told it's going to be a quick war, over in no time, cost us nothing, will pay for itself. Those are the same things that are being told right now by the Obama administration with respect to the potential upcoming Syrian conflict. That time around, way back when, people could not wait to go to war. Now, finally, they're skittish. Those on the left side of the aisle never want to go to war. That's me. I don't see the point. I can't believe that after all these years of civilization, that is still an acceptable form of conflict resolution. But somehow, it still is. Those on the right, way back when, gung-ho for war. Now, not so much. Maybe they're not gung-ho because they hate the president. Fine. Whatever it takes for these people to not be just thirsty for blood, I'll take it. The Iranian message intercepted in recent days came from Qasem Soleimani, the head of Revolutionary Guards Quds Force, and went to Iranian-supported Shiite militia groups in Iraq, according to U.S. officials. Iranian officials on Friday denied their government was plotting attacks against the U.S. Here, let's go back just a little bit with this whole Syria thing. President Barack Obama says a proposal to put Syria's chemical weapons under international control to avoid U.S. military strikes could be a potential breakthrough. Here's the thing. John Kerry was giving an interview, and Kerry said, he was asked, if there's anything we could do to stop the war from happening. And Kerry, completely off the cuff, bless his heart, said, sure, talking about Assad, he could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons to the international community in the next week. Turn it over, all of it without delay, and allow the full and total accounting. Apparently, he was being hypothetical, and the State Department responded in kind right away. But Russia wasted no time responding. So Obama told NBC News in an interview Monday that he remains skeptical that Syria will follow through and turn over its stockpile. So he's taking a statement from Damascus, quote, with a grain of salt initially, but he says he would prefer to have a diplomatic solution to the crisis rather than launch a military attack, and called it a potentially positive development. Dig this. First Lady Michelle Obama opposes military action in Syria. The First Lady. President Barack Obama told PBS and NBC News on Monday, my own family members, they're very wary and suspicious. Obama said the First Lady does not want the country to engage in another war. I like that. Underline that. Another. We don't want another war. Sam Stein tweeted, Obama to NBC, if you ask Michelle, do we want to be involved in another war? The answer is no. The president gave a policy speech this past Tuesday. And what was interesting about that speech was because end of last week, walking into it, he was expecting to simply make his case for war to the country. And then this whole Kerry Russia saying that they'll get the weapons, and Assad said, yeah, I'll turn over all my chemical weapons. Then that stuff happened. So if you watch the speech Tuesday night, it was a 17-minute speech. I was glued to the screen. Okay? When he gave the speech, he opened with a history, a description, and the first 10 minutes of the speech could have been written before what Kerry said. That part seemed like it stood. Then he said that Congress is on hold and they're not going to vote on this issue just yet. Now, Congress came to an agreement last week of what the strike would be. They've not voted on the strike itself. Then after, say, I think about the 11th or 12th minute mark, the president said, Biden is going to meet with Putin on Thursday. And he's going to work closely with Russia and China. Okay? But the president also made the point to say, remember, these would be targeted airstrikes. No boots on the ground. We know the country is sick of war. And it's not going to be an open-ended conflict. But he also urged folks to go look at the tapes of the people that were killed by the Syrian regime. He said, go look at the tapes. It's pretty gnarly stuff to watch. He's obviously been touched. And good, I'm glad he has. So for now, the country is not going to war. And I really couldn't be happier about that. There's a lot of talks going on right now between us, Russia, China, and Syria. And obviously, we're going to keep our finger on the pulse and see what happens. But so far, war's been averted. Good on you. Good on you, Secretary of State Kerry. Off the cuff, planned or not, whatever it was, bless you. The Syrian debate did teach us something, though, this week. So, in arguing against Obama's proposal to attack Syria over its use of chemical weapons, congressional lawmakers have cited poll after poll that shows the vast majority of their constituents oppose the United States' involvement in another Middle East conflict. On his official Facebook page, Senator Mike Lee from Utah posted, "During my recent town halls, it was clear that my constituents had many questions and concerns about military intervention in #Syria. This week, my office has received numerous phone calls, emails, letters about this issue, and 1.7, follow these numbers, 1.7 of those contacting my office support military intervention. An astounding 98.3% of my constituents are reaching out to me and do not want to see the U.S. involved in another military Syrian conflict. However, this is where things change. In the wake of the Newtown, Massachusetts shooting, support among the general public for expanded background checks on gun owners was widespread even in the deepest of red states. In fact, few policies have been as popular in recent history. Even before Newtown, CNN reported 94% of Americans supported background checks. Yet, these poll numbers did not compel lawmakers to act. They're listening on Syria, but they're not listening on gun control. Now, I understand there's a yawning chasm between 98% and 94%, and I'm laying the sarcasm on pretty thick right now. Okay? So, in the spring, the bipartisan compromise produced by Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, and Pat Toomey, Republican from Pennsylvania, a bipartisan bill, which would have mandated checks at gun shows for internet sales with exemptions for sales between family and friends, failed to gain a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. In April, Mike Lee, the same Mike Lee, for example, voted against Manchin-Toomey, even as some 82% of the state's residents supported such background checks, according to the poll by the Center for Study of Elections and Democracy. Senator John Boozman, Republican from Arkansas, opposed the Manchin-Toomey amendment, complaining that there was no unified voice on this issue, although polling data from Mayors Against Illegal Guns found that 84% of Arkansans supported expanded background checks on all gun owners. Marco Rubio from Florida also voted against the bill, despite a Quinnipiac poll indicating 91% of Florida voters supported universal background checks for gun buyers. And Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, I'm putting in an editorial here. Grassley's a nut. Back to the story. Came out against the Manchin-Toomey compromise when polling showed that 88% of Iowa voters wanted expanded background checks. After the Manchin-Toomey vote, Lee wrote in an op-ed for the USA Today, gun control advocates point to polls that show support for expanding background checks, but members of Congress do not get to vote. Broad poll questions. They have to vote on specific legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a cop-out if ever I have heard one. So what's driving your local congressman if it isn't you? My. More than 3/4 of people don't want war in Syria. So they say, more than 3/4 of my constituents don't want war in Syria. I'm voting for what my constituents want, no war in Syria. More than 3/4 of the constituents, your constituents, want expanded background checks. Right? Nothing to hide. That's what the conservatives all say. Hey, you've got nothing to hide, right? More than 3/4 of them want the background checks. Well, can't have that. So if they're not listening to you, who are they listening to? They might be listening to Charles and David Koch, felons. Koch Industries, which is run by Charles and David Koch, Now, they're oil billionaires. But here are some of their consumer brands. Lycra Fiber, Stainmaster Carpet, Georgia Pacific LLC, Dixie Cups, Brawny Paper Towels, Quilted Northern Bath Tissue. If you buy any of these, you're supporting the Kochs. That's K-O-C-H. Should say Koch, so when people go to look it up, they don't look up C-O-K-E. It's not like the soda. It's Koch, but it's pronounced Coke. Follow me. Koch Industries is obsessed with secrecy to the point that it discloses only an approximation of its annual revenue, $100 billion a year, and says nothing about its profits. Charles, 75, and David, 71, each worth about $20 billion, are prominent financial backers of groups and believe that excessive regulation is sapping the competitiveness of American business. They inherited their anti-government leanings from their father, Fred. He was an early advisor to the founder of the anti-communist John Birch Society, which fought against the Civil Rights Movement and the United Nations. Charles and David have supported the Tea Party, a loosely organized group that aims to shrink the size of government. Really, a whole group, the Teabaggers, that want to do what the billionaires want them to do. They're good little puppets, ain't they? Phil Dubois, a Koch employee who testified against the company, said that he and his colleagues were shown by their managers how to steal and cheat using techniques they called the Koch method. In 1999, a Texas jury imposed a $296 million verdict on a Koch pipeline unit, the largest compensatory damages judgment in a wrongful death case against a corporation in U.S. history. The jury found that the company's negligence had led to a butane pipeline rupture that fueled an explosion and killed 2 teenagers. Koch's refinery unit pleaded guilty in 2001 to a federal felony charge of lying to regulators and paid $20 million in fines, essentially to the Koch's pocket change. The Kochs have vaulted into the American political spotlight in recent years. Koch Industries has spent more than $50 million to lobby Washington since 2006, according to the Center for Responsive Politics, a nonpartisan group that tracks political donations. The company opposed derivatives regulation and greenhouse gas limits. The brothers have backed a foundation that has trained thousands of Tea Party activists. The Tea Party, a popular movement whose name stands for Taxed Enough Already, has grown into a potent force in national politics. 60 representatives for Congress out of a total of 435 identify themselves as Tea Party members. Virtually every Republican candidate for president, including Texas Governor Rick Perry and Minnesota Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, have solicited the group's support. U.S. companies have been banned from trading with Iran since 1995 when Bill Clinton declared it a threat to national security. Iran supports Iraqi militants, Taliban fighters, as well as terrorist groups, including Hamas and Hezbollah, according to U.S. State Department. In his annual State of the Union address on January 29, 2002, in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, George W. Bush, president at that time, said Iran was part of what he called the axis of evil. A year later, in his January 20, 2003 speech to Congress, Bush said, "In Iran, we continue to see a government that represses its people and pursues weapons of mass destruction and supports terror." Why is this important? Because Iran, illegally, is still doing business with the Kochs. Or the Kochs are doing business with Iran, however you want to see it. A few more things here, and then I want to go ahead and move on. I think you're getting the point about the Kochs. 4 federal agencies, including the National Institutes of Health, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, say that benzene causes cancer. Okay? Koch Industries attorney Vincent Mitlecki wrote a memo to another company lawyer, Thomas Meeks, saying the refinery had given the state incorrect information about its uncontrolled benzene emissions. Those levels of emissions could increase the risk of cancer to refinery employees and the public. The EPA had sued Koch Industries a year earlier for a series of pipeline leaks in several states, including one that left a 12-mile-long oil slick on Nueces and Corpus Christi Bays in October of 1994. They've also increased their dumping of wastewater. Look. We could just go on and on. This was a huge, huge story. And of course, just massively ignored by the media. You can read the full story at Bloomberg.com or DailyKost.com, and it's titled, Koch Brothers Flout Law Getting Richer with Secret Iran Sales. The Koch brothers, obviously huge supporters of whatever Republican is running for president too. And I think this time around, during our most recent election in 2012, quite a few of us voted for Barack Obama. Obviously he won. I voted for Barack Obama. I voted for Barack Obama though because of the Supreme Court. He's not as progressive as I would like, but he does pick good progressives for the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has gone hardcore right wackadoodle in recent years. I think the Kochs could have spent some money on Obama this most recent year and gotten their money's worth. I know that's a harsh thing to say, and you're probably wondering what's behind it. San Francisco, California, August 20th, 2013, just a few weeks ago. In court papers filed, the United States Department of Justice requested that George W. Bush, Richard Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, and Paul Wolfowitz be granted procedural immunity in a case alleging that they planned and waged the Iraq War in violation of international law. If you're not sure what I just said, the Obama Justice Department is asking a court to grant immunity to the Bush administration for the Iraq War. Our current president, who won a Nobel Peace Prize, just a few weeks ago, before asking Congress to give him a bill declaring war in Syria, is asking for immunity for the Bush administration for starting their illegal wars. Plaintiff Sundus Shaker Saleh, an Iraqi single mother and refugee now living in Jordan, filed a complaint in March 2013 in San Francisco federal court alleging that the planning and waging of the war constituted a war of aggression against Iraq, a legal theory that was used by the Nuremberg Tribunal to convict Nazi war criminals after World War II. The DOJ claims that in planning and waging the Iraq War, ex-President Bush and key members of his administration were acting with the legitimate scope. Okay? They were acting within the legitimate scope of their employment and are thus immune from suit. Chief Counsel Indar Komar of Komar Law said. The Westfall Act certification submitted pursuant to the Westfall Act of 1998 permits the Attorney General and at his or her discretion to substitute the United States as the defendant and especially grant absolute immunity to government employees for actions taken within the scope of their employment. Her lawsuit alleges that Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, and Paul Wolfowitz began planning the Iraq War in 1998 through their involvement with the Project for the New American Century. Google that, by the way. That is when they began planning the Iraq War. A Washington, D.C. nonprofit that advocated for the military overthrow of Saddam Hussein. Once they came to power, Saleh alleges that Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz convinced other Bush officials to invade Iraq by using 9/11 as an excuse to mislead and scare the American public into supporting their war. Finally, she claims that the United States failed to obtain United Nations approval prior to the invasion, rendering the invasion illegal and an act of impermissible aggression. Couple of things. First and foremost, he wouldn't be asking for immunity if the Bushies were not war criminals. So he's asking for immunity. Yeah, that sucks. But at the same time, he's also admitting, yeah, they committed war crimes. So PNAC, 1998. There was also Mickey Herskowitz, a Bush family friend, who was, in 99, ghostwriting Bush's biography at that time, A Charge to Keep, And all presidents generally try to do a book or a biography, something, or an autobiography, something before they run for president so they can have something out there. Start getting interest in the candidate. And Bush was no different. Mickey Herskowitz documented Bush saying that if he had the chance, that he would go to war in Iraq. And he was going to get a lot of political capital out of it, and he was going to have a successful presidency. The Iraq War wasn't planned after 9/11. It was planned before, long before. And it was sealed by the Supreme Court, appointing George W. Bush to be president. So, I know, heavy week. All right, let's get into crazy old Glenn Beck. In an interview with Amy Chozick that ran in the Times, Glenn Beck said everyone in politics should just get along with each other. It's an interesting turn from the often controversial and divisive right-winger. But it didn't last long. The interview turned sinister as Beck told Chozick that progressives should be hunted down like Nazis. Oh boy. Beck, can we stop dividing ourselves? Do racists exist? Do bigots exist? Yes, but most of us are not. Most Americans just want to get along, but we can't do that. What has happened to us? Oh, Beck. Chozick, but you said you were going to hunt down progressives like an Israeli Nazi hunter. Oh, Beck. Oh, I think I will. I think these guys are the biggest danger in the world. It's the people like Mao, people that believe that big government is the answer. And it's always led to millions dead. Always. First of all, let me point out, opposite ends of the spectrum. Absolutely opposite. There is no connection. Okay? The hallmarks, let me point this out. The hallmarks of fascism and Nazism include, follow me, rabid nationalism, voter suppression, rule by a few, little tolerance of meaningful opposition, racial superiority, punishment of the poor and sick, media as a propaganda tool, obsessed with military and war, education as an indoctrination tool, demonization of intellectuals, hatred and fear of communists, subjugation of women obsessed with Christianity, strongly aligned with corporations, anti-union, and takes advantage of disasters to push agendas. Look, we don't have the time, okay? But I could give you a recent example for every one of these 16 points. Let's just go rabid nationalism. My country, right or wrong. Don't question her. Okay, voter suppression. Yeah, that's happening all over the place. Rule by a few. The billionaires run Washington right now. Racial superiority. The whites' rights, the Aryan groups have exploded since Obama became president. Fear of communism. Forgive me. Most of my friends are from the left side of the aisle. Naturally. You hang with like-minded people. None of them are afraid of communists. But I can't throw a rock without hitting two teabaggers who are screaming about communism. It's not fair to call either major American political party Nazis. Okay? If one were close, though, it would definitely be the right, not the left. But let's be fair here. The Nazis slaughtered millions of people. In the Iraq War, the conservatives only slaughtered hundreds of thousands. They're nowhere near Nazis. It's a long way to go. Quite honestly, I think we should just drop the Nazi talk. Why is everything Nazi? Why is everything Hitler? How is it every single thing Hitler? What did they use to describe evil things before Hitler came around? And I know it's Beck. It's Glenn Beck, and he just says nutty things because he's got to collect a check. He's got money to make. And I probably wouldn't care if there weren't so many nut jobs out there that hang on his every word. So we reported last week that Sweet Cakes by Melissa had closed up shop. That's the anti-gay pastry sweet shop in Oregon that lost more than half their business after coming out as full-blown homophobes. They said they did it for Christ, but you'll have to forgive me. I can't buy into that. So we get this. A Christian radio host told his listeners this week that he had no problem with them attending gay weddings as long as the same-sex couples were also told that they, quote, had committed an abomination and shall both be put to death. Woo! You know, it's been 10 years since I got married. I don't know how much better I would have felt had somebody told me that I'm condemned to death after I got married. I got married. I thought I was doing the right thing. In a clip posted by Right Wing Watch on Thursday, host Kevin Swanson ranted that the Pink Mafia, okay, had forced an Oregon wedding cake business to shut down after it refused to serve same-sex couples. Of course, talking about Sweet Cakes by Melissa. I have no problem attending happy weddings, he explained. Okay, if there's a gay wedding and everybody's gay and everybody's happy, I have no problem with people attending a happy wedding, okay? But I'm not real big on attending neuronic weddings. So, I draw a distinction between gay weddings and neuronic weddings. Neuronic weddings are what Nero came up when he said, let's do same-sex weddings. However, and this is the same nut job, I can make an exception. I think you can attend a wedding if you hold up a sign that reads Leviticus 20:13, he added. I think that would be appropriate. You attend a wedding, hold up a sign with Leviticus 20:13, you know, word for word. If a man sleeps with a man as he sleeps with a woman, then the two of them have committed an abomination and they shall both be put to death. You could hold this up at a wedding. And I guess if it comes down to it, you bake a cake for a homosexual wedding, you could put Leviticus 20:13 on the cake. Earlier this week, former Navy chaplain Gordon Klingenschmidt had a similar idea for Christian photographers working at same-sex weddings. Klingenschmidt suggested that photographers should print on every photograph a Bible verse from Romans 1:32, which he interpreted to mean that homosexuals are worthy of death. Yikes, yikes, yikes. For more info, you can Google Captain James Gordon Klingenschmidt, PhD, or go to www.prayinjesusname.org. Let's get to some good news. Oklahoma is giving up abstinence only education. This is fabulous. This is science winning. The school district in Oklahoma's second largest city has begun to implement a plan to teach comprehensive sex education in its schools, according to Tulsa Channel 9 News. The district plans to launch the program in 4 selected schools and then expand to include the entire district. Classes will be taught to 7th, 9th, and 11th graders at 2 high schools and 2 middle schools. Officials said the state's status as 4th highest in teen pregnancy has spurred educators to abandon abstinence-only education. 44% of students who became pregnant or who are married at that age fail to graduate from high school, and that's something that affects them for the rest of their life, said Tulsa Public Schools spokesperson Steve Mayfield. Mayfield told the Tulsa World that, to his knowledge, sex education classes that include information about contraception and STD protection have never been taught in Oklahoma schools. Oklahoma, like many Republican-led states, has no statewide sex ed requirements for students, and like many of those states, Oklahoma is not seeing the steady decline in birth teen rates that states with comprehensive sex ed are enjoying. The Guttermock Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of sexual and reproductive health and rights worldwide, released a study September 1st that showed that states without comprehensive sex ed for teens consistently have the highest numbers of teen births per year. Kim Schultz, director of Oklahoma's Campaign to Prevent Teen Pregnancy, told Channel 9, "We really view the teen pregnancy prevention program as a dropout prevention program. This is really going to help students stay in school, finish school, go to college, get jobs, make Tulsa a better place to live. I think ignoring the issue is something we don't have the luxury of doing any longer," she said. Parents will be given the choice to have their child opt out of the classes so that their kids can continue getting pregnant and dropping out. Science eventually always wins. Let's go to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of, if not my favorite justice. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who recently officiated at a friend's same-sex wedding, told a Philadelphia audience Friday that growing acceptance of gay marriage reflects on the genius of the Constitution. I just love this. And we did. We reported on this last week that she officiated that wedding. Ginsburg said equality has always been central to the Constitution, even if society has only applied it to minorities, be they women, blacks, gays, over time. So I see the genius of our Constitution and of our society is how much more embracive we have become, that we are at the beginning, Ginsburg said in a far-ranging discussion of her work at the National Constitution Center, steps from the nation's founding at Independence Hall. Her increasingly candid, forceful writing, often as the voice of dissent in 5 court cases, has attracted ardent fans, including New York University Law School student Shana Kaziznik, who wore a notorious RBG t-shirt. I love this. I'm going to get me one of these t-shirts. A twist on the similarly named Brooklyn rapper, Kaziznik, 25 of Philadelphia. I tried this name over and over, and it's just such a strange name. But you get the point. Okay. 25 of Philadelphia, who designed the shirt and has sold about 2,000 of them, so admired the justice's writings and accomplishment that she started a blog this year devoted to Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in all her glory. In recent years, the Supreme Court has repeatedly decided pivotal issues by a single vote, from the Bush v. Gore election to the Health Care Reform Act to the June decision to strike down part of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Ginsburg has often been on the losing side of the epic battles, but said that some would have turned out differently had the first female justice, Sandra Day O'Connor, not retired in 2006. I've always wondered that. The year she left us, in every case where I was among the 4, if she had remained, I would have been among the 5. So her leaving the court made an enormous difference, Ginsburg said. Ginsburg, 80, gave no hint she would wind down her judicial career anytime soon, noting that the fall docket includes such important issues as campaign finance limits and affirmative action, and despite her sharp ideological differences with some colleagues, including her close friend Antonin Scalia, she said their work environment remains cordial. Long live the notorious RBG. See, I'm mad at Obama right now over the whole pardoning the Bush administration thing, obviously, but This is why, because when people say the president's spending too much money, president's doing this, president's doing that, president actually really, honestly, by himself can't do much. But you know what he does do? He does pick Supreme Court justices. Fun story time. I love this. So, Tim Tebow, who is not a favorite on this show, follow me. The Arena Football League team, owned by the band Kiss, wants Tim Tebow to be its new quarterback. The LA Kiss announced Monday it offered Tebow a 3-year contract with the possibility for Tebow to earn millions. Tim Tebow is one of the most recognized and respected athletes in the sport, Paul Stanley of Kiss said in a news release. His joining us would mean great things for his fans and for our team, especially from a business standpoint. His credibility within the sports arena is paramount, and with our commitment to bringing football without compromise back to LA, we're excited to see how this offer turns out. In addressing Tebow's merchandising power, Gene Simmons of Kiss said, "We're excited for the opportunity to see him in an LA Kiss uniform, and for the LA Kiss fans to be rocking their Tebow shirts and jerseys. Oh yeah, it might help if he's on the field too. That's kind of a secondary for them. For those of you that, I don't know how many follow Kiss. I followed Kiss my whole life. Gene Simmons especially is a master at advertising and marketing and all the rest. He's just magic. He really is. And this Tebow thing, hey, I don't even know if the LA Kiss team is any good, but this is a chance to make some dinero, eh? Okay, let us get to the week in Zimmerman, okay? Oh, and it goes like this. So I can't stand this guy. So, he was detained. Then he was released. What happened? Zimmerman's going to wind up dead before long. Okay, so his wife made a 911 call. And after he was released, the call was released. During the 5-minute phone call, Shelley Zimmerman tells the dispatcher that George Zimmerman punched her in the nose. And she said, threatened her family with his hand on his gun. She also said he took her iPad out of her hand and smashed it and cut it with a pocket knife. Throughout the call, Shelley Zimmerman sounds shaken, telling her dispatcher she is scared and unsure what her estranged husband is capable of. Let me stop for a minute. Oh, I'll tell you what he's capable of. If he'll shoot a 17-year-old unarmed black teenager, he'll do a hell of a lot worse to you, Shelley. Just standing his ground. At one point, she breaks down in tears while the dispatcher attempts to calm her down. During the call, the police arrived at the scene, and Shelley Zimmerman asked for medical assistance, saying her father was visibly shaken and feeling like he was about to have a heart attack. So he was released, but the pieces of the iPad were collected. Here's why Zimmerman smashed the iPad. Because she taped a whole lot of the domestic violence on the iPad. And so he takes the iPad and he smashes it into many, many pieces. The police come, they arrest him, they scoop up the pieces of the iPad, and they've taken it to their lab, and they're going to try to extract the video from it. If they extract that video showing him knocking hell into his wife, he might actually go to prison this time. Or he might not. Florida's a wacky state. This is not the end of the Zimmerman thing. I have a few more for you, and I'll have a few more next week. George Zimmerman, whose acquittal in the death of Trayvon Martin, is asking Florida to pay $300,000 of his legal expenses, his attorney told the Orlando Sentinel on Monday. Zimmerman will rely on state law that allows a defendant who has been found not guilty to be reimbursed for costs associated with a case that the paper reported. Mark O'Mara, attorney for the 29-year-old Zimmerman, will soon prepare a motion seeking authorization of the payments and will submit that to the judge who presided over the case. The lawyer told the Orlando Sentinel on Monday evening. O'Mara could not be reached for comment. Zimmerman could not recoup attorney fees under the law, but he could seek costs related to the trial, such as expenditures for expert witnesses, and an animated video that defense attorneys showed jurors, the Orlando Sentinel reported. The costs could range between $200,000 and $300,000, the paper said. So he kills somebody. He goes out looking for a fight, kills somebody, an unarmed somebody, who's just on his way home, found not guilty under the state's crooked stand your ground law, and now wants you to pay for it. Oh. And this is a conservative, by the way. We also heard this. Zimmerman divorced. His wife has filed for divorce from him. Shelley Zimmerman, George Zimmerman's wife, has filed for divorce. My Fox Orlando confirmed the news with Zimmerman's brother, Robert Zimmerman Jr. The couple's marriage became a hot topic after Shelley Zimmerman expressed uncertainty during a Good Morning America interview. When asked if she and George Zimmerman were still together, Shelley Zimmerman said, "I'm not going to answer that." She added that she wants to have children and stay married. With George, the interviewer asked. That's something I have to think about, Shelley Zimmerman replied. The filing comes less than 2 months after he was found not guilty. One more Zimmerman story and then I'll leave it alone. It's just been a whirlwind. Just days after announcing that he had accepted a job as a legal analyst on CNN, Mark O'Mara has stepped down as George Zimmerman's attorney. O'Mara made the announcement one day after Shelley Zimmerman called 911 claiming that her now estranged husband was threatening her and her father with a gun. Police say they are still investigating the incident and that both George and Shelley could eventually face charges. Police also said that video of the incident was captured on Shelley Zimmerman's iPad, which was smashed to pieces, and they're trying to retrieve that video. During a press conference on Monday, Mark O'Mara, was visibly annoyed at the recent events surrounding his former client. When asked if he had any advice for Zimmerman, he simply said, "Pay me." Even his attorney is sick of him. That comes to us courtesy of deadstate.org. I want to get into this, and we're winding down here pretty good. And then I want to get into my final thought. So this ties in with both Zimmerman and my final thought. William Woodward's lawyers to use the Bush Doctrine to defend their client who allegedly killed his neighbors. Lawyers for a man accused of killing two of his neighbors and wounding a third cited the Bush Doctrine of preemptive strikes in a motion defending their client. William Woodward, 43, is accused of shooting 3 people at a Labor Day barbecue in Titusville, Florida, according to WESH. Woodward allegedly shot and killed Gary Lee Hembry, 39, and Roger Piccior, 44. Bruce Blake, 49, is expected to survive his injuries from the shooting. According to Florida Today, Woodward's lawyers claimed their client had been threatened many times in an ongoing dispute. They also said Woodward's actions are justified under Florida's Stand Your Ground law, which allows people to defend themselves with deadly force if they feel they face an imminent threat. Raw Story notes, the defense also cited the Bush Doctrine, a foreign policy principle used by President George W. Bush to justify the invasion of Iraq, based on the premise that doing so was an effort to prevent a future attack. In footage of Woodward's police interview obtained by Florida Today, the 43-year-old told authorities, "We've been tormented by these people for months. They've made my life a living hell, and my wife can't go anywhere without an escort," Woodward said. "We can't even let our kids go outside." So both the Bush Doctrine and the Stand Your Ground law have been cited in this case. Legalized murder. I've made this case more than once. The Stand Your Ground laws, that's really all they did. They legalized murder. And they didn't legalize murder for the sake of us protecting ourselves. There's certainly a way for us to protect ourselves without murdering people. But we're a fearful society. We say, you get a gun, gun's going to make me feel safe. Right? I don't live in fear if I live with a gun. If I'm armed, Second Amendment, yada, yada, yada. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. You're all scared little boys. I myself don't own a gun. And I feel perfectly safe. Perhaps I've got a fairly good understanding of the world. I've said more than once on this show that I like guns. I've taken them, shot them off myself, but I don't own one. I might own one of these days when, well, in retirement, the wife and I plan on getting a piece of land. I would never own one in an urban setting, and I definitely wouldn't own one while I've got children under my roof. Because the chances are exponentially higher of a loved one being accidentally killed with that gun under your roof than you are of actually killing a perpetrator. I don't have to be afraid. I've got a gun. Actually, that's why you have that gun. You have that gun because you're paralyzed with fear. Now, this isn't to say that I'm going to walk out of this studio when this show is done and not be killed. I could very well walk out this door just 5 feet behind me, step out of my front porch, and be shot by some gangbanger who wants to make a point or get initiated into his gang, or some redneck that doesn't like the way I look, whatever. I could very well be killed at any moment. But I'm not afraid of it, and I don't live in fear. And if I am shot and killed, I didn't have to walk through my whole life afraid of it. Because that can be just as scary and paralyzing as anything. I'm safe because I have a gun. If you believed that, you would not carry a gun. You're not any safer with the gun. In a lot of the recent shootings, there were people with guns around. But not everything is a Rambo movie. We're not prepared for when these things happen. Because really, they're barbaric. And they don't make a lot of sense. And your fight or flight instinct, no matter how good it is, may not be good enough for you to pull your heat fast enough. Also, why? Why would you want to? The opinion that I'm expressing at this moment, well, could also lead to me being killed. But I am saying to you, not everybody, right? Like I said, I like guns. You own a gun, fine. But if you are a white supremacist or a teabagger, Obama's going to take my guns. The world's a scary place. You're a nut. And you're not powerful. You're not free. And you live in constant fear. You're a scared little boy trying to get along in a man's world. I think that, as Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And as I have started doing this show, I have found myself reading so much more than I used to. I thought I used to read a lot before. Reading has become a part-time job for me. And I don't mean job as in it's unfun, but it's time-consuming. And I'm learning a lot about the world. And the more and more I learn, the less and less afraid that I am. And it's not as though I'm not reading about bad things happening. I'm reading about bad things happening all the time. But it's not on every corner, in every city of the world. There are exceptions. They're here, they're there. If it bleeds, it leads, and that's how it makes the news. And I don't walk around scared of anything. I've got natural fears like anybody else. If I ride a roller coaster, do I not scream like a girl? Yes, I do. There are things that scare me. But I don't live in perpetual fear. This guy in Florida that killed his neighbor incited the Bush Doctrine and the Stand Your Ground law. You're a scared little boy. George Zimmerman. I don't even think he's going to make it to 30. George Zimmerman. A scared little boy. These gun nuts who show up to the Capitol screaming about how the president's going to take their guns away. A little education and a little bit of paying attention would tell you, actually, no, he's not interested in taking your stupid little guns. You're all scared little boys. And you're never going to be free as long as you feel that way. I hope that at some point you find peace. And I hope that it does not come from a muzzle flash. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me as usual. This is The Fire You Can't Put Out, episode 34. I want to say thank you to my good friend, co-host and producer Kevin. Shout out to Angela. I know you're still out there. And to Leo, who has been supporting our shows also. And you. I don't know your name, but if I find out your name, I will be thanking you on the air as well. I have enjoyed sitting with you for another week. It is time that I go. And I want to thank you for all your support. We are the fire you can't put out. And we will prevail. Good day.